Hello and welcome back to the Big Breakthrough 4-week online program. Well, we are into our fourth and final class here throughout this journey of your big breakthrough. And I hope you've been getting a lot of not just awarenesses or ahas, but truly the big breakthroughs. It does take applying the work, and I know that that can be challenging at times, but I promise you this. If you are committing to the homework, you will have your big breakthrough and truly take your business, your life to that next level. So let's just go ahead and recap from class 3 some of the homework items that you were working on. Number 1 was to recognize your resistance cycle. Now, I'm actually really curious what came up for you in recognizing that resistance cycle and having spent some time in that place and seeing how that's manifested in your life. So I'd love to hear from you either through email or you can give me a call, either one. You have all of my contact information. So I really want to be a partner with you in this journey, and I just want to hear, how did that go? The other part was around sitting with your foundation. Now, this can be really a challenging thing to do, and where I find most clients get really stuck and don't push through to get to that big breakthrough, because it's hard to sit with that foundation of whatever it was, whether I'm unworthy or I'm unwanted or I'm not important or I'm bad or whatever you uncovered as your foundation. The thing to remember is that this ego part of ourselves is the one that's judging that and making it bad or wrong, when in reality, it's not. It's just something that the child you made up at some point in his or her life because of some experience that made you feel bad. It doesn't have to dictate who you are any longer. But the only way to do that is to be able to apply these next steps that I'm going to be giving you. And the first part of it was having enough awareness of your foundation and not jumping into some kind of coping mechanism, which is your role, that victim, that villain, that hero, that you were able to stay present enough with it. Because what comes next, that presence and awareness, is going to be critical. You got to have that first. So I hope you were able to really sit with it, be present to it, and not jump into those mechanisms to cope. And if you did, all right, it's all part of the process. It's part of the journey. The third homework item was your SOSS. Now, this tool is such an essential tool because it can really take you out of your hijack when it's occurring. And, I've had clients say in the past, like, they just couldn't remember to do that in the moment, which makes total sense because the logical side, the neocortex part of the brain takes a back seat. You're in a state of survival or stupidity when the hijack is happening. So the logical brain goes away. So I get sometimes applying the SOSS in the moment is hard, because you don't have the presence or the awareness enough to go, oh, hey, here's where I could use this tool. But I want you to remember this. It's never too late to apply the SOSS, even if it's after the fact of, after the hijack has already happened, after the situation or circumstance that hijacked you in the first place is done. Like maybe it's several hours later and you realize, oh, shoot, I totally could have used that. Or, a day or two later and you're going, darn, I definitely could have used that at that point. The parts that you want to use after the fact are the seeking gratitude and seek information, especially the seek information part. It's always great to go back and clean it up and seek information. For example, if your hijack had something to do with your spouse and you realize a few days later, like, oh, I could have used this tool. Well, now you can. You would be seeking information first from yourself and then perhaps from your spouse. The information you're seeking is still the same thing you would have done had you caught yourself in the moment. It would be asking questions like, what's really going on for me? Why was I so upset or hijacked in that moment? What was coming up for me? And then maybe coming to your spouse and asking the same questions. And you're just saying, hey, I realized that a couple of days ago when we got into that XYZ argument, I was in a state of just being triggered. You could use the word hijacked if you want, but they may not understand that language. So use something that, makes sense to them. And then share with them, like, I was just thinking about that and was wondering what came up for you? What happened for you? What was it that I said that had you feel XYZ? Whatever the situation was. So just want to put that out there, and that it's never too late to apply that SOSS. And these are tools that are going to only support you moving forward. Now, this is the big thing. Here is what's truly going to create your big breakthrough, and the formula in which you will be able to apply in any area of your life to have what I call healing. Because there's a difference between healing and dealing. To get to your big breakthrough, you can't keep dealing with things. Because in a dealing state, most likely you're hijacked and you're using your role of victim, villain, or hero to stay in that place or to cope with the situation or deal and manage with whatever's coming up. When you heal, it goes to a whole nother level. You're not even creating things that you would have to deal with because you've already healed it at the core. So nothing's coming up. You're not having to deal with it because you got to that healing. So what I'm about to share with you is called the Ultimate Life Success Formula. And this Ultimate Life Success Formula, oh my gosh, this is such a powerful, powerful formula. It actually came to me in my very first workshop that I taught about 10 years ago. And it was called the Healing Workshop, which then turned into the No More Pain Workshop, and is now what you've experienced today, the Big Breakthrough. And as I was sitting in this workshop, there was about 20 people in the room. And this woman kept saying, yes, but how do I heal? How do I get to that next level? How do I truly reach success? And it was such a divine moment. It was like, these words just came out. And I said, okay, you want to know how? Here it is. Here's the formula of how. And it was just like this divine light energy that just flowed through me. And these words came out into a formula. And that's the formula that I've been using and applying for my own life the last 10 years, as well as the thousands of others that I've coached and worked with in their lives. And you're about to get it. So here it is. Here's the formula. It actually begins with grieving. Now that may be a surprise to you, or maybe not, but think about this for a moment. What is grieving usually connected to? Like, what do we typically associate grieving to? It's loss, right? Some kind of loss. You have lost some family member, lost a close friend. Grieving is typically connected to the loss of a person. And in our society, grieving, when you're grieving or when you've lost someone, it's really the only time in our society that says it's okay for us to feel our emotions. And even more importantly, not only is it okay for us to feel our emotions when we've lost someone, but it's needed, it's important. It's almost like people push us towards feeling and being able to grieve because they know, and you know, that if you don't grieve the loss of someone in your life very dear to you, then you're going to be harboring a whole lot of pain and carrying all that pain with you into your future. The same thing goes for anything in life. Grieving isn't just about loss. It's about feeling. So I want you to really absorb this and take this in. Like, you need to reprogram your brain in this moment to know that grieving is not just about loss. That's just what we've been taught culturally and in our society, that when you lose someone, it's okay to feel. But really, grieving is all about just that, feeling. Now, let me take you through the phases of grief, because there's 5 steps or phases. Number 1 is shock. Number 2 is denial. 3 is sadness. 4 is anger. And 5 is hope. So, when I'm talking about grieving being the first step in this ultimate life success formula, you have to be able to let yourself feel all of the things that are coming up for you that are attached to anything that could be associated to loss. Not just of someone, but maybe it's the loss of a client. Maybe it's the loss of someone saying no to you in a complimentary coaching session. Maybe it's the loss of a dream. Maybe it's the loss of a business that you have to close. Maybe it's the loss of a spouse that you're getting a divorce. Maybe it's the loss of money. You lost your wallet. Maybe it's the loss of your car and the dream car that you wanted, like you went to get it, but you didn't. You weren't able to. Maybe it's the loss of the house that you weren't able to buy. Maybe it's the loss of the moment that you didn't say something when you know you should have. Maybe it was the loss of, I should have spoken up at that meeting to get that promotion or that raise and I didn't. So I hope you're seeing that when I'm talking about loss, it is about feeling, and it's not just about the loss of someone. It's the loss of anything in your life. Now, when this loss happens, the initial feeling is shock. It's like that moment of like, or what? The shock happens pretty quickly. The rest of the steps or phases actually can take a lot longer, especially denial. Now, denial is where most human beings live and unconsciously, and sometimes consciously, want to live. Because think about this, in the state of denial, you're not tapping into your sadness or anger at all. You think you're doing yourself a favor by being in that place of denial, but really you're not, because there's nowhere to go when you're in a place of denial. You're stuck. If you've ever felt stuck or like unclear or foggy, you're in the denial state of this formula. Denial is also where other people want you to live. Because think of this. If you're not in denial and actually feeling your emotions, well, what does that mean for them? Do they have to feel theirs? Do they have to deal with you while you're feeling yours? Yeah, nobody likes that. We've been taught from a very young age, now this goes back to our first class, we were taught at a very young age that to feel emotions, especially the ones that fall under the negative spectrum, like sadness or anger, those emotions are not okay to feel. You're at the grocery store, you're a little child, you see candy bar at the checkout line, you tell mom, hey, I want this candy bar. Mom goes, no. You immediately start crying. You're sad, obviously. You wanted the candy, mom's telling you no. You start crying. What does mom do? Stop it. Cut it out. Don't do that. Stop crying. Well, that only makes you angry. So now you start tantruming, but I want that, or however that looks, which makes mom even angrier. And she goes, stop it. No. So Imagine all of those hundreds of thousands of moments that happen like that, which are just small, insignificant things. Yet we're being programmed at that young age that to feel sadness or anger is not okay. Let's flip it to the other side and talk about happiness and joy. So when you're laughing and giggling and like, oh, I'm so happy, life is good, mom or dad isn't going, stop it, cut it out, that's not okay, right? Those emotions we learn are okay to express, to feel. That's why we express and feel those and aren't harboring or holding on to the joy or happiness because they actually got expressed. We hold on and harbor the sadness and anger because those didn't get expressed. All right, so coming back to this formula, denial, we are programmed to live in, and it's where most of humanity lives. Denial is also where your role will come out because you're feeling something that you need to defend or protect yourself against. You jump into your role. Sadness and anger. Now, when I say sadness, that's just the general category for all of the emotions that would fall under that spectrum, that emotional, energetic spectrum. So it's just the name to hold that general category. But when I say sadness, I'm talking about all the emotions that would fall under that spectrum. So here's an example of all of the other kinds of sadness emotions. Disappointed, disconnected, low, regretful, discouraged, down, gloomy, forlorn, melancholy, sorrowful, weepy, helpless, hopeless, depressed, bleak, morose. So all of those emotions are emotions that fall under this general category of sadness. Anytime you're experiencing any of those emotions, you would be in the sadness phase of the grieving in this formula. Now, same for anger. It's the general category that's just used to hold any emotion that falls under that spectrum. So here are some examples of other emotions that fall under the anger category. Annoyed, bored, cold, crabby, cranky, critical, cross, displeased, impatient, indifferent, irritated, peeved, arrogant, aggravated, mad, resentful, sarcastic, disgusted, furious, hateful, hostile, menacing, outraged, ranting, vicious. Those are all emotions that fall under that category of anger. Now, here's the thing with the sadness and anger I want to mention as well. Sometimes anger will be felt before sadness. And it really just depends on what emotion you're most okay feeling. So if you feel more okay with sadness than you do anger, this would be how it shows up for you. Shock, denial, sadness, anger, hope. If you're more okay with the emotion of anger, then anger will come first, and it will go shock, denial, anger, sadness, hope. So it just really depends on which emotion feels more okay to you, which one have allowed yourself or learned throughout your childhood that emotion is more okay to feel than the other. Whichever one that is, that will come right after denial. Before I get to hope, I just want to say that, when you're actually allowing yourself to be in the grieving, you're going to be moving back and forth between sadness, anger, and denial. Denial, sadness, anger. Anger, denial, sadness. Like it ebbs and flows. You're going to find yourself back and forth. It's not like you go, okay, I'm now in sadness and I'm done with sadness and I'm going to move on to anger now. It doesn't happen like step by step by step. Sometimes it ebbs and flows. The key here in this formula, and I keep saying this word, allow yourself to feel and express these emotions. Now that might scare you. If it does, it goes back to what I was saying about our program, that we have learned from childhood that these emotions are not okay to feel or express. And you've learned that many different ways. One example I already shared with you. But another example might be, let's say that you saw a lot of anger in your household. You know, your parents fought a lot. Maybe you had an alcoholic or abusive parent. So you saw anger a lot. You also learned through observing all the things that were happening in your household that anger looks that way. And you decided that, you know, at some point you saw something happened. Maybe you saw dad hit mom. And you thought, okay, that's what anger looks like. Or maybe you saw mom throw a plate at dad's head. And you thought in that moment and decided, oh, that's what anger looks like. Or you experienced an older sibling yelling and screaming at you and hitting you. And you decided, oh, this is what anger looks like. For sadness, maybe you had a parent that was constantly a victim, always crying, always depressed, always locked themselves in their bedroom and just wept. You decided that's what sadness looks like. And maybe you also decided, I'm never going to feel like that. I'm never going to let myself feel like that or be like that, which makes logical sense. But again, here's the thing. Those emotions are natural emotions to the things that you're experiencing in your life. And if you're not letting yourself feel them to express them, they're going to get stuck again and again. And they're getting stuck in that amygdala part of your brain. And that is what is causing you to get hijacked continually. So what needs to happen here is for you to start reprogramming yourself. And reprogramming that sadness or anger doesn't have to look the way that you always thought it did. And that takes time. I'm going to share with you some tools at the end of our call of how you can start to reprogram yourself. But you've already begun to do it just by being in this class and just by having an awareness or having the aha moment of like, oh yeah, okay, I did believe and program myself that that's what anger or sadness looks like. And it's formed those limiting beliefs that we've been working with. So the key here, to get to the hope state, which you will naturally fall into when you let yourself fully go through the first 4 phases of the grieving. So you're going to naturally experience a state of hope when you've gone through shock, denial, sadness, and anger. It's naturally going to happen. And this hope state feels amazing. I know you've felt it before. It's not the like sheer joy kind of emotion, but it's just this sense of everything is good and okay. It's actually more of a peaceful state versus a super joyful state. All right, now, as always, if you have any questions with this, please reach out. don't stay stuck in your question, because this is a big concept here. And in order to reprogram yourself, you might have some questions that need answered. You have all of my contact info. Please don't sit in that, because you'll get stuck in denial. And that's what we're trying to get you out of. Okay, let's move into the other parts of the formula. Once you've gotten through these 5 steps to grieving, you're going to naturally fall into the rest of the formula. So I'm going to share with you the rest of the formula, and then we're going to break down each piece of the formula. So here's your ultimate life success formula. First is grieving and going through those 5 phases of grieving. Next is forgiveness. The next part of the formula after forgiveness is acceptance. After acceptance comes surrender, and the whole thing equals ownership. Now, we just went thoroughly through the grieving, so I'm going to jump into forgiveness, and let's dissect forgiveness. Forgiveness has 2 forms. We're not taught this, but we're just taught that forgiveness is forgiveness, but actually there's 2 types of forgiveness. There's ordinary forgiveness, and there's radical forgiveness. Let's dissect each one, starting with ordinary. When you practice ordinary forgiveness, you let go of the past, but hold on to the idea that you have been wronged by another person or situation. And this actually takes a great deal of time to feel any kind of result from. You may have come to a point of thinking you've forgiven until another situation arises, which brings up the old wounds and feelings that have been pushed all the way down. So it's like ordinary forgiveness is that concept like, oh, let bygones be bygones. I know I need to forgive them. I know that's what I'm supposed to do. And you convince yourself that you have. But guess what? You're in a place of denial. You really haven't forgiven them. And them, by the way, can include yourself. So them or yourself. You've just tried to convince yourself that you have. But deep down, you're still harboring anger or sadness around the situation that happened. And you're going to know that because of this part here. Another situation arises, which brings up those old wounds, those old feelings once again that you thought you had already forgiven. This is why grieving is the first step. You gotta get through those emotions, because that's what's gonna get you to the real forgiveness, the true forgiveness, which is radical forgiveness. And it's called radical for a reason. It's a radical concept. Here it is. Radical forgiveness states that you've come to the realization that, seen from the spiritual perspective, nothing wrong ever happened. Therefore, there is nothing to forgive. Think about that. From the spiritual perspective, nothing wrong ever happened. Therefore, there's nothing to forgive. You can then just live your life knowing that without exception, everything that happens in life is divinely guided, entirely purposeful, and is for your spiritual growth. Everything. All of the hardships, all of those moments where you felt rejected, that you didn't follow through on something because of your self-doubt. Anything where you divorce, being abused, injury, illness, death. And, those are big things to come to this place of knowing without exception it was divinely guided entirely for the purpose for you to spiritually grow. And you cannot get to this place of radical forgiveness if you don't go through the grieving phases first. So I want to emphasize the word natural or naturally fall into. When you've gone through the grieving and you get to that hope state, you're going to naturally fall into radical forgiveness. It's nothing you have to convince yourself to do, nothing you have to force yourself to do or create. You're naturally, and imagine this, like when I say fall into, like I just imagine myself like falling back into a bed of feathers. It's naturally going to happen when you've let yourself go through the grieving first. You don't have to force it. If you are, you're just in denial, and it's not real forgiveness. Let's talk about the next phase of the formula, which is acceptance. Now, acceptance is tricky because it can be fleeting, especially when you are in some kind of pain, some kind of breakdown, some kind of block, some kind of obstacle, some kind of hardship, challenge. Acceptance is definitely fleeting when you're stuck in that. This is an area I'm really passionate about because in the self-improvement or self-development industry, acceptance is talked about a lot. And it is important to accept, but when it's not applied through this formula, guess where you end up falling when you're trying to accept something? If you're saying denial, you're right. It can be the same thing like forgiveness. You're convincing yourself like, yes, I accept that. There's nothing I can do about it, so I'm moving on and I've accepted it. No, not true. If you haven't let yourself feel anything, then you haven't gotten to acceptance. You're stuck in denial. I just recently had a conversation with my daughter around this because she was sharing with me that she's really frustrated with two of her friends that have become very passive. And guess where they learned it from? Parents. Both of their parents are very passive too. And they take on this role of being a victim. But it was bothering my daughter because there was something that happened. One of them, her parents are getting divorced. And my daughter was asking her friend, well, how do you feel about that? And her friend just said, it's okay. It's okay. I just got to move on. It's going to be fine. And she said, I could clearly see that my friend had tears in her eyes and she was just trying to stop it. So that place of like, it's okay. It's going to be fine. We think we're accepting it, but really we're not. And you're not doing yourself any favors. You're not. Because you're stuck in a state of denial. And in that place of denial, your foundation will always be poked and your roles will always come out. You will be in a constant state of conflict and drama. In the formula, acceptance naturally happens. So it's the same thing. When you've gone through the grieving and you fell into radical forgiveness, you will naturally fall into the true acceptance. Nothing you will have to push yourself to do, convince yourself of. It's naturally there. Surrender. Surrender and acceptance can be similar. And oftentimes, surrender is associated to some kind of submission or resignation, like a giving in or a giving up. And that is not what surrender is. Surrender is actually releasing and trusting. If there was a true definition of surrender, that's what it would be. It would be about releasing and trust. If you've ever wondered what true trust is or what that feels like, oof, it's that. When I went, oof, that was a surrendering moment. It's like I'm releasing. Now notice my language, because language is really important. I'm not saying giving up or giving in or letting go. I'm saying releasing. There is a trust present, and that's what surrender naturally is. In the formula, again, surrender is not something that you have to force yourself to do. Once through acceptance, you've already surrendered. You're there. The last part, ownership. That is the place that we want to get to. This whole formula isn't about ridding yourself of your foundation. It's not about ridding yourself of your limiting beliefs. This formula is all about getting to a place of ownership, because when you do, you reprogram yourself. That's what we've been moving towards this whole time, is reprogramming what was originally programmed that is false and inaccurate. But we cannot do that by trying to get rid of or overcome, because both of those things involve resistance. And whatever you resist will persist. So ownership is this, it's challenging to explain, but here's my best analogy for this. Back in high school, I was in an abusive relationship, and my boyfriend actually put out his cigarette on my arm. And it left a huge scar on my arm where he, put out his cigarette. So when it first happened, it was obviously really painful, like really bad. And if I had not cleaned it out properly, it wouldn't have healed well. Would have gotten infected, all sorts of things would have happened to it. That is like not having ownership and not going through the grieving, because I wouldn't have been cleaning it out properly. So think of it in that way. When you're not grieving and going through the formula, you're not cleaning out your wounds properly. Does it hurt to clean it out? Yeah. Did it hurt to actually clean that open, like bubbling wound on my arm? Heck yeah. It hurt really bad. But I had to, otherwise it wouldn't have healed and would have gotten worse. So through using the proper healing mechanisms, this wound eventually healed layer by layer by layer by layer, to the point where it's now a scar. So I have this scar from this wound. Now, when it first happened, if I hit it, smacked it, or poked it, it would have hurt really bad. If someone else would have hit it, smacked it, or poked it, it would have hurt really bad. Now that it's a scar, it's still there, but if I hit it, smack it, or poke it, it doesn't hurt anymore. If someone else hits it, smacks it, or pokes it, it doesn't hurt anymore. Even though it's still there, I can see it through my scar. That's what ownership is like. It's like a scar that was an open wound at one point, but through the proper healing mechanisms, it became a scar to where it no longer hurts you. Ownership is the same way. When you own the limiting beliefs that you've taken on throughout your life, you reprogram them. They don't cause you pain, hurt, harm. When you reprogram your role and your foundation and get to a place of owning it, it will no longer cause you a hijack, because you won't feel pain around it. So there you go. Ownership is where we want to get to. And the only way to truly get to this place of ownership is through this formula. Now, I actually applied this formula recently, and it applies to anything. This is why it's called the Ultimate Life Success Formula. So I was driving down the street, and I was being pulled over by a cop. I see this cop behind me, his sirens go on, and I was like, oh, shoot. That's not the word I used, but I'll save you from the word I actually used. So here's this cop pulling me over, and my immediate thought was, okay, I'm pissed. So I get on, anger is an emotion that I'm more okay with sadness. So I first went through the shock of like, oh shit. Oh shoot. See, I said the word. Okay. So that's what I really said. Oh shit. There was the shock. Then the denial came really quickly. Like, why is he pulling me over? I wasn't speeding. I wasn't going beyond the speed limit. There was my denial. Then I went to anger. I was like, damn him. I was not. I was totally doing the speed limit. Then I went through sadness. Like, why does this have to happen? I was in such a great mood. And I got really sad and kind of teary because I was in such a great mood right before that happened. And then I found this hopeful place, and it just felt very neutral, which immediately took me into the radical forgiveness. And it was just this light, unattached moment. I wasn't attached to what happened. So the acceptance was there, the release was there, and I was owning what had happened. So in applying the whole formula, and all of this happened in less than a minute, the officer walks up to my window. He says, you were speeding about 5 miles over the speed limit, but I'm only giving you a warning. Here you go. Bam! I was like, yes, this formula works, because I was able to apply the formula. I got a warning instead of a ticket. I'm just sharing this with you because I want you to be able to get that. You know, this formula works for very deep, old beliefs and wounds, and it works for superficial things like getting a speeding ticket if you apply it. Let me share with you some tools that are going to help you with this. Now, I mentioned this earlier in class that I was going to give you a couple of things that would help you. These are some real life applications. The first is to speak your truth. Now, speaking your truth is a very critical part in reprogramming your beliefs and having full-on crazy breakthroughs. Speak your truth has 3 things you need to keep in mind. Number 1 is that anytime you speak your truth, you want to say it in the I form. It's your truth, so it's in the I form. I, me, my, mine. Second thing is that you want to speak from a place of ownership rather than blame. Because a lot of times we think we're telling someone the truth, like how we feel, but we're blaming them for it rather than owning the emotions. And the third, and this is actually the hardest with speaking your truth, is to have no expectations of how the other person is going to respond or what the outcome will be to you speaking your truth. 0 expectation. I form, take ownership rather than place blame, and have no expectations. Those are the 3 key things to speaking your truth. Now, when would be times that you would actually apply speaking your truth? It could be with anything. The example that I shared earlier of you can go back and clean it up at any time when we talked about the SOSS. I had shared about an argument with a spouse and that you could go back and seek information through asking questions. What you might want to do is actually start with speaking your truth first. Like I had mentioned, I was feeling hijacked in the moment, or if you're not using that word, you could say, here's my I form. I felt like I was wrong. Like I did something wrong. And I took it out on you. And I've realized that now. What was going on for you? And there's your seeking information. So you spoke your truth and then you sought information. Imagine if you could actually speak to a partner, a spouse, a potential client, a friend, a family member in this way. I'm telling you, it takes balls. It takes you being vulnerable. But wow, the power that can come through just this one tool is crazy amazing. Second tool is to acknowledge. And what I mean by that is like acknowledge the truth of what's going on. Like just by saying, I'm hijacked. you're acknowledging the truth of what's going on, or acknowledging that you're in a role. I'm being a victim in this moment, and I understand that, but I can't get out of it. So not only did you acknowledge, but you also spoke your truth. Acknowledge your feelings, like in the grieving. I'm feeling angry right now. I feel sad. Acknowledging is a form of expression, and it gets it out of you, up and out of you, and out of the most important place, which is the amygdala. Acknowledging out loud is key, not just in your head. You need to say it out loud. There's something way more powerful when you say it out loud, or write it down. The thing is to physically get it out of your body, the acknowledgement. And acknowledgement can be in any form. You could say, I acknowledge I'm being hijacked. You could just say, I just want to say I'm being hijacked right now. I realize that I'm avoiding making a follow-up call because my foundation of I'm bad is showing up. You know, any form of acknowledgement works. Number 3, allow the feelings. I think we got pretty deep into this when we talked about the grieving. You got to be able to allow your emotions and express them. And number 4 is to meditate. Now, there's a lot of people that do really great with meditation and a lot of people that don't. And I've worked with both, and I get both because I used to have a hard time with meditation, and now I'm pretty good at it. Could I be better? Absolutely, always. There's always another layer of learning. Meditation is a beautiful way to connect to your subconscious, which is where a lot of these limiting beliefs have come from. It's where your role was formed. It's where your foundation was formed. And it's where the hijack happens, is in the subconscious mind. So to be able to meditate will allow you to connect to that subconscious. So I look at meditation in 2 forms. There's meditations that are meant to help you feel very calm and relaxed and just get you very centered and grounded, and those are really important. But then there's also the types of meditations that have you connect with a deeper part of yourself to get answers, so that subconscious can guide you. And it's a much deeper, it doesn't always leave you feeling calm and, you know, connected. It might leave you feeling like really uneasy and kind of raw. But those are the powerful ones. Those are the ones where you're getting some major breakthroughs from. So when we were talking about sadness and anger and how you may have learned from a child that they look a certain way, through meditation is where you can start to reprogram that child that's within you. The child that thinks that anger only looks like yelling and screaming, or that sadness only looks like being locked up in a room and hysterically crying or continuing to weep. That child needs to be reparented on what sadness or anger looks like. And the best way that you could do that is through meditation. So I actually have a guided meditation that I'm going to be sharing with you as well. And you can use this guided meditation. Now, it was created for a client of mine, and it's just my voice. So what you want to do is put some soft music in the background, along with playing the recording that I send you. That way you have some music also in the background, but you're just basically listening to my voice as it guides you through connecting with that inner child and beginning to be able to reparent them. However you choose to use meditation, even if it's just to feel calm and connected and stress-free, beautiful. It's still a really great life application tool that's going to have you be able to get to ownership and reprogram yourself. All right, that brings us to our completion. It has been a pleasure being your partner in this journey. And I would love to hear what your biggest breakthrough of the course of the program has been. So shoot me an email, info@coachwithalejandra.com. It was, again, such a pleasure and honor to be with you throughout this journey, and I look forward to getting to meet with you either in person or via email in the future. Many blessings, and we'll see you soon.